If Hot Toys announces a figure that you think is the best and definitive version of that figure, you get super excited about it, pre-order it, counting down the days until release. Leave it to Hot Toys to announce a figure that'll make you question your opinion on that.
So be it, Jedi.
What's going on, guys? Back in another video. Unless you've been living under a rock, you're aware of the fact that Star Wars is essentially paying Hot Toys bills at this point. So today, we're going to be discussing the recent announcements, more specifically, this Darth Sidious from Revenge of the Sith and the other two limited figures, that being the Clone Commando from the Bad Batch and the Obi-Wan Kenobi in Mandalorian armor from the Clone Wars. Man, that's a mouthful. So stay tuned while I share my thoughts on this Hot Toys Star Wars madness. Let's get started with the banger of the bunch, and that is this Darth Sidious from Revenge of the Sith. When I first saw this, my initial reaction was, uh-oh. If you remember last year, for May the 4th, Darth Sidious from the Clone Wars was announced. And in a way, that figure sort of has a special place in my heart, because it will be the first figure I've seen from announcement to release since being in this hobby. So it's my most anticipated figure. The source material, the episode from the Clone Wars from which the figure comes from, is arguably one of the best of the series. We see Darth Sidious facing against Maul and Savage Opress, and essentially just making a joke out of the both of them. It's a true display of Darth Sidious's prowess as the Dark Lord of the Sith. So needless to say, I'm pretty excited for it. But then Hot Toys announces this, which is arguably the definitive Darth Sidious, and in a way that kind of puts a hole in my excitement. As you can see here, I don't have the real estate to really accommodate multiple iterations of every character. So ultimately it comes down to a choice. Which one is right for me? Now at this point, I'm still making payments on the Clone Wars version, and I have no plans of canceling it. You definitely don't want to rush to do that. But I know deep down, once I get that figure, I'm going to kind of be looking at that new Darth Sidious out the corner of my eye, thinking, man, that is cool. I feel even collectors who don't collect Star Wars necessarily, and collect maybe horror figures, would be tempted to buy this because this thing is definitely freaky looking. But I think the Clone Wars version has things of its own that make it stand out, even compared to this one. You get the Ian McDiarmid head sculpt, you get the more thin and drapey robes, you get two LED lightsabers, and I don't think you're going to wake up in the middle of the night having nightmares about it. So I don't think you could really go wrong with either. What I think would be the best of both worlds is to pick up the recently announced Darth Sidious, and maybe later down the road pick up the Ian McDiarmid head sculpt and maybe a couple of hands, so you could have swap out parts and have two display options. It definitely creates a situation where you feel as though you're prompted to make a decision. And I think those kind of decisions are the hardest ones to make in this hobby, because you can't collect everything. As I mentioned earlier, space is a finite thing. I only have this one display cabinet, and I'll likely only ever have this one display cabinet. So I'm really limited to about 24 to 32 figures, and that's pushing it. There will always be the battle of prolonging the inevitable, that is, having to move figures on so that others can take their place in your collection. It's not really the main topic of this video, but I feel as though it's pertinent because that's the initial response I had when I first saw this figure announced. Is, man, the figure that I'm going to be getting soon, or sooner than this one, is already so awesome. But then you're faced with the issue of, which one do you want? You can't really have both, so it comes down to a choice. Whether you have a room full of Modu cases or a dozen DTOFs, you will eventually run into the same issue of one figure's got to go so another can stay. It may come sooner for others, but regardless, I think it's inevitable. As of now, the plan is to wait for the Clone Wars Sidious to be released and arrive, get it in hand, check it out, enjoy it. I'm sure it's going to be great. And then if I decide I want the newer Darth Sidious from Revenge of the Sith, and it's still available for pre-order, I may do that. But if I can't, well, I'm just going to let fate decide. Obviously, this figure is remarkable. I think it's truly terrifying, and it truly represents the evil that is Darth Sidious. But I want to know your thoughts on this figure. Would you have rather seen the Emperor from Return of the Jedi 2.0? Would you have rather seen this figure in a different costume? Preferably, I like the costume in which he's wearing when Mace and the other Jedi initially confront him. I think this is a little too poofy and too over the top for me. But it's scene specific. It's what he's wearing when he's fighting Yoda. Definitely let me know down in the comments below. Okay, so we were given 2 more limited figures, that being Clone Commando, Imperial Clone Commando from the Bad Batch, and this Obi-Wan Kenobi in Mandalorian armor from the Clone Wars. My opinions on these figures are pretty different from one to the other. I think they're both pretty good figures to be limited because I think the demand for these figures is probably lower than that of others. One is a trooper, the other is a niche variant of Obi-Wan Kenobi from a episode of the Clone Wars. But I think both of these figures kind of have 2 different motives behind them. So we'll start off with the Clone Commando. First, I think Clone Commandos are cool, obviously. I think we can all agree that any trooper pretty much is cool, especially clones. There are some inaccuracies, and I know you've probably already heard it multiple times. This is essentially just Hunter repainted. Even though he's supposed to be a commando, the armor on this figure is pretty inaccurate from that in which we see in the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch and even the video games. Overall, I don't think it's figure breaking. I think many would have liked to see just a plain white version. Does this open up the door for potentially getting Delta Squadron? I think so. Overall, I think this is a good example of what makes a limited figure desirable. It has a lot of reused parts, but at least the helmet is a new mold, has LED light up functions, and troopers are hit and miss. People like troopers, but do people really like every version of troopers? Me personally, I've got a 501st clone trooper, plan on picking up another, and I'll be set. I just need 2. Some people have more, some people don't collect them. We're different. It wasn't for me, but if you're lucky enough to get it, I'm super happy for you. Okay, so let's talk about this Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mandalorian armor. This figure is a little different. It kind of raises some alarms, I guess you could say. I have the Clone Wars Obi-Wan on the way. It's paid off whenever they decide to ship it. We all know how long that takes nowadays. I'll be happy to get it. But I would say this Obi-Wan is for the die-hard Clone Wars fans or even the die-hard Obi-Wan fans. It wasn't for me. I had zero interest in wanting it. Given the source material, the episode of the Clone Wars that Obi-Wan is wearing this armor is a super good episode, one of the darkest and heaviest ones of the Clone Wars. I just don't have that desire to have this. As I said earlier, I don't have the ability to have every version of every character, even if I really like it. And I think this is a true example of Hot Toys taking advantage of what is a low production cost and putting an exclusivity label behind it and being able to market it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I know every trooper is essentially that. The only thing on this figure that isn't reused, and you could argue that, is the head sculpt, because every one of these armor components we've seen before, whether that be on a regular Mandalorian, Jango Fett, what have you. And the head sculpt is from the Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Clone Wars that we just got released. Nothing really new here, but I'm pretty sure we all had the idea of buying the Mandalorian Super Commando and kit bashing it with the Clone Wars Obi-Wan head sculpt and essentially making this figure. So for those that wanted it but didn't get it, you could always do that. What we can take away from this is anything is up for grabs now. But I still feel as though we're seeing things now that we never thought we would see, such as super niche versions of characters, clone commandos, Revan, and Starkiller. My advice to you would be expect the unexpected, because anything is on the table. If Hot Toys announces a figure that you think is the best and definitive version of that figure, you get super excited about it, pre-order it, count down the days until release, leave it to Hot Toys to announce a figure that'll make you question your opinion on that. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think they're releasing too many limited figures? Do you think it's just a cash grab? Do you think they're putting too much attention towards Star Wars this year? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, please leave a like. If you can leave a comment, that helps out more than you know. And if you feel like committing to the channel, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.